We're here. Okay, so let's start with a roll call, and we'll start with M.
Oh, M. Friedrichs from the Town Council.
Probably a bad idea to start with you in your mouth full.
Sarah Callahan, I'm an alternate.
Okay.
Marty Gorham, member at large.
Veronique Luddington, Land Stewardship Coordinator.
Rich Rain, Public Works Director.
Todd Selig, the administrator.
And Neil Sluppy, Conservation Commission. And Ted?
And Ted Howard, trustees of the trust funds.
Okay, great. All right. So the first thing we'll do is approve the meeting agenda, but we can't vote on it, but we'll just maybe with a show of hands. Has everybody had a chance to look it over? Pretty simple. Okay, who would like to vote yes to approve the agenda?
Well, we can't vote.
Oh, that's right. Who would like to not vote?
This looks great.
Okay, so we, who likes the agenda?
Very attractive agenda.
Okay, all right. So we can proceed.
You
Okay,
could vote me in as a voting member, but that's not going to help you either.
I guess we could, right? But no.
Or appoint me as a voting member. But no, I don't think it makes any difference because there's no voting.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
Right.
That was the idea of
Okay,
it.
we'll just have a nice meeting. Okay. So we approved the minutes. Now, again, we can't vote, but I just want to say that when Ann asked me to be the chair, I said I would prefer if we change the meeting to the fourth Monday at the same time, same place, because I have the Conservation Commission meeting that same evening. So again, does anybody, is everybody okay with that, basically? And if you're not, just speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, everybody's good with it?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And also Ann got some positive response from Carolyn, from Mirta as well. So we'll start with the October meeting. So next meeting in September will be September 10th. So, okay, so that is done. Stewardship Coordinator update. Veronique, please.
Okay, so months of July, August, we are continuing work at Long Marsh on bog bridges, and we finally used up all the boards that were left from last year. Thank you, Sarah. So I just got an estimate for new to order boards from Goosebell Lumber to continue work because there was money allocated in the budget for repairing, replacing the bog bridge on the Yellow Trail. And I'm planning to do this with volunteers from UNH this October. So I will let you know about that, but there's $1,650 that were allocated in the budget for that purpose already. So I'm working on figuring out how much I can order so we can possibly use them up for other projects and have them delivered. Doe Farm.
Oh, Veronique,
Sorry.
we should touch base because there was a Great Bay Resource Protection Partnership grant that would reimburse us for some of the cost and expense for those,
For the trail work?
for the trail work, right, at Long Marsh Preserve. So,
Okay,
like, just you and I should touch
Okay.
base to take a look at that budget and the
okay,
costs and how much we can move over and
Okay.
to apply to that grant.
okay.
Okay?
A grant that you already got, that was...
Yes, but
yeah.
you have to, the town has to pay upfront for the expenses for those projects.
Yeah.
And then you've got to submit those receipts to
Yeah.
Great Bay Resource Protection Partnership, and then they'll reimburse you,
Okay,
Oh.
okay?
Okay.
And
Oh,
that's
thank you.
got to be done before December 31st of this year.
okay, so that's actually works out perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks. Sarah.
Okay, I just want to ask a question of Sarah. So this is for the materials?
That is
Not for-
correct, right?
Not
Yes.
for any work, but for the actual material?
Yeah,
Just
For
for
the
the
yeah,
materials?
yeah, so that Great Bay Resource Protection Partnership grant pays for materials, any professional work that you need to, you have to pay for, and any permits you need to obtain, so.
And planning, yeah.
Right, so if you had to, the wetlands permitting can be
Okay.
used out of that grant fund. And then you can use matches, volunteer hours as a match, because there needs to be a match component. And there's been plenty of volunteer hours logged on that project that more than exceeds the match that's required by the town for that grant.
Okay,
Good,
so for
good.
example, if anybody from DPW helped out, like with equipment or anything like that, that would not be covered, or the town wouldn't be reimbursed for those hours just for outside help, like outside consultants or outside
Yeah, no,
contractors?
I believe staff's time, I'd have to relook at the grant, but I believe staff time can also be reimbursed.
Okay,
It needs to be tracked as such. And no, it has to be active on the ground work at the site. So any sort of planning, writing up any planning work can't get counted towards that project, essentially.
okay,
But, if Veronique spends 10 hours out there and she can take her hourly wage and say she spent 10 hours with volunteers working on bog bridges, she can get reimbursed for
great.
that time.
Okay. Yeah.
I believe. I would have to double check.
Yeah,
and
we'll have
I'm
to
sure.
check. Yeah, let's connect on that for the amount and things like that. Thank you.
If we're updating signage out there at all, would that?
No.
No.
They do not count signage. They do not count signage. You
Okay.
can't, in that Great Bay Resource Protection Partnership grant.
Okay, good, thank you, Sarah.
Thanks. Doe Farm, we went, Elliot, who's a volunteer in the audience here, and I went that's the second time for me this year to deal with the illegal fire pits at Moat Island. So we filled them, we removed the bricks, we removed the grill that people were using as a nice grill there. I'll just keep checking it. It's not much, I know there's not much we can do about it, but so for now it's filled and clear. And it's lasted actually a week, so.
I don't know how many times I went. It was at least twice a summer I had
Yeah, so I've
volunteers
done
out
twice
there.
already, yeah.
It isn't. I don't know how they get them out there. They must paddle them in by canoe in a bucket, and I don't know. They're pretty-
Right. Oyster River Forest, so all the plastic trail markers have now successfully been removed. I think there's 2 left on the whole property, other than the corner trail markers with the names of the trail. So I guess I talked to the PD, there's not much we can do, so I guess we're gonna have to blaze the trees again. So that's gonna be a full project. There's just no going around it, because spending the hours to put some trail markers again is kind of a moot issue if it's gonna moot effort. So that's the plan on that.
So you'll at some point organize a crew to go out there and paint the actual blazes on the trees?
Yeah, and rescrape some of the trees and yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully, an effort with a good group from UNH this fall too with the eco reps. We're in the last phase of obtaining the DES trail permit for upgrading the bridge at Oyster River Forest for the work that's been talked about for a while. And there are some caveats there. The Fish and Game requires the work be done between April 15th and October 15th for protecting overwintering turtles. So we're gonna have to work on that to figure out when the project can be done. Rich had offered to do, work the project, but it doesn't sound like it's feasible before October 15 because it's coming fast. So I talked with Todd also a couple days ago, and because the money has been earmarked for this year for the project, we were thinking of purchasing the materials or putting a purchase order before the end of the year, so we can get a hold of encumber the funds and then do it in the spring. So we need to talk more about that with Rich.
Can I ask a question on this one? So, Rich, is this going to be a combination of your department and outside contractor work?
I would say primarily our department. I don't see that we'd bring in any specialty contractors for this. So we'll have to, I think it's a good idea to purchase the materials ahead of time. The restriction, what was that again? It was, it had to happen before?
Between April 15 and October 15.
Yeah.
Of this year?
No,
Of any year.
It's
Of
a
any
permanent
year.
restriction.
Within the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so I think we'll be able to do that, but just won't be able to do it before October 15th of this year. That would be highly unlikely. But I think we could plan for the future, maybe in 2026, getting that done. So we'll purchase all the materials, as Veronique says, and stockpile that. And then when the permit window opens, start that work.
Okay. Thank you.
Veronique, when did you put the request in for the New Hampshire Heritage Bureau? For that permit, for the wetlands crossing?
at the beginning of the year,
Beginning of what year?
this year.
So January?
Yeah, this year. And then we worked with Mark West, and he just submitted literally last week
Okay.
the trails permit has not even been issued yet by the DES.
Okay, I can't remember if there's those New Hampshire Heritage Bureau reports have a timeline to them.
Well, the
I
fish.
can't remember if it's 1 year or 2 years. Hopefully it's 2 years, because if not, then you have to actually you have to make a second request. Let me double check.
Okay.
Let me double check that.
Yeah, because
that can mess things up as far as timing, and then you might have to resubmit request another report from New Hampshire Heritage Bureau. It's done because people spend too long to get projects done, but
Yeah, and the
Mark
fish
would
and-
know. Mark would know like right off the top of his head, really.
Okay.
And I would have to look it up.
Because the fish and game consultation took months, so it only came back like I think when we talked to Mark, so that was like in July. So
Okay,
Um,
and so you might have like a legitimate.
okay, I'll find out. Oh, we can find out. I removed the wild parsnip at Oyster River Forest. I had talked about it, I think, last month, about finding it with Ellen Snyder to continue the work she's been doing for years there. And the good news is I only found 8 plants, and 3 of them were regrowth from the old piles, through the plastic. So I'll go back again in August. This year, for some reason, the plants were not really that tall and high as they usually are. So they kind of like got, in the fray of all the other vegetation. So it took a while to look around. So I'll recheck in August. But Ellen thought that was pretty good news on that front.
Yeah, I'd say it was similar last year.
Yeah, and it was only in that one main patch. We didn't find anything in all the other tributary patch and all that. So I added everything to the report she had started. And I'll put the update on the website, because it was on the website. The library presentation that I did conjointly with Rachel Kaskowski went well, about trails and conservation property. We had 21 attendees, and we will be giving it again at Riverwoods Durham for their lunch and learn early September. And also for the Active Retirement Association, Susan Wagner contacted me, and that's gonna be more in the spring probably with their calendar. So I think that's good to get the words out on our properties and trails and
I have
opportunities.
a question about that. for
Sorry?
you. I have a question about that. Do you have any experience with using hiking poles, Veronique?
I don't.
You don't? Okay.
No.
Oh, I have a lot of experience using hiking poles. Why do you ask that question?
Well, because I thought it was very interesting. I saw advertised, it was like a, learn the trail system, but for older adults, also some practice using the hiking poles, because it really helps with stability and endurance. And I thought it might be a nice tie-in with the Parks and Rec and your presentation, if either you or Rachel or someone there would be able to demonstrate how to use the hiking poles. It might kind of tie everything nicely together and give folks an opportunity to practice, because depending on the person, some folks kind of struggle with the coordination quite a bit.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good idea. I know there's a group that does that that's been doing that at Stratham Hill Park for a while through the town senior department. So I'll contact the person and ask her, because that's a valid point. That's really, if you don't know how to use them properly, it's really no help. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah, thanks. So on the volunteer front, through Erin, we connected with a student association called the Eco Reps, and they do a lot of trail cleaning and invasive pulling, mostly on UNH land. And they have a good group now. And the new president wanted to get more traction on helping the town of Durham also for their for trail work. But the only obstacle for them was transportation, because a lot of their member students don't have transportation. So we had a meeting with Malin Clyde from Nature Groupie, and she offered to help with transportation with their van, the van that they have. So we had a good meeting, and we already planned a work day on October 4th, so most likely at Longmarsh, from 10 to 2, that's a Saturday, kind of as a tryout to see, the new president also, Sydney, wanted to see how many people sign up, how it goes. So that would be kind of like a good test, but they really, their goal was to do at least one day a month, which is promising. And they have over 100 members, I think, so all together, So I think that would be a good addition as far as different types of volunteer crew for the
Could
properties.
the town also offer our Parks and Rec van to help with transportation?
I guess I could ask Rachel. The only thing was because it's on a weekend, I don't know, we'd have to figure out the logistic of who can drive the van or things like that. But yeah, I'll ask Rachel. Yeah, thank you. And talking about connecting with Erin, I applied, so I submitted a proposal for their sustainability capstone student project. It's for Erin's class, basically. And this would allow us to get support from 3 to 4 students for the fall semester for about 25 hours a week, all jointly for them, for organizing the BioBlitz. So I think because we have a small subcommittee for organizing the BioBlitz, but I think that would be really a big help for us. And so it would be late August to December. It would require mentoring of the group. So I thought I'd talk to the subcommittee, on the side, so that we can kind of share duties as far as mentoring, because it requires a meeting a week with the students. It can be on Zoom, it doesn't have to be in person, but I think the first few ones should be in person, kind of trying to work together and organize what we are asking from them. And Erin was hopeful that we can really get come up with a timeline, have them contact all the tour leads, the possible tour leads, and establish a schedule for the day, and also design the poster, or how we can help us put the word out, things like that. So I think it's really exciting. I should find out in the next 10 days, so by the 25th, from Erin, if we've been chosen, because she had other proposals, but I think that would be a good help. We're also meeting with Hayley Andriozzi from UNH Co-op Extension about organizing tips from her. Obviously, she's written the manual about BioBlitz, and she's very knowledgeable. And I had a meeting with Katie Broder from the Seacoast Science Center, and at least I know Anne and I are still planning to attend that BioBlitz at the Seacoast Science Center in September. So that would give us some little tips about organization. But that's the work on the BioBlitz front so far. So I'll let you know as soon as Erin gets back to me about the student support. I think it would be a great partnership. On the survey front, so there was money budgeted for surveys, for several property surveys this year, and we've done Jackson's Landing. So I reached out again to Paul Doberstein to get an estimate for the Stallworthy property survey. That was the one Anne had kind of like directed that we should do for this year. And he's gonna send an estimate in the next week. I'll share it with you. And he was hopeful he can do it before the end of the year.
How many properties do we have that are not surveyed?
Sarah, can you help on
Oh,
that?
I don't have that.
So there was weeks.
We have a spreadsheet with it in there, and I'm
Okay.
sorry, I don't have that.
There's,
I can share that, but
I know
Okay.
there's weeks.
Weeks,
sure.
Doe Farm, Wagon Hill,
Meadows.
Meadows.
Meadows. Well, I know that Long Marsh Preserve does. Oyster River Forest does.
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, if you want to just, send the spreadsheet along, that would be,
Yeah, no,
Helpful.
I mean, Anne made a Word document with the list of the ones that was required in kind of prioritization and order.
Okay.
So I can dig that up
oh, yeah,
and,
great.
and,
Yeah, I'll be meeting with Ann hopefully the first week in September, so it would be great if she could pass on all those documents, everything that's been done up to now, hopefully.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great.
Other than that, Sarah and I met yesterday to brainstorm for the fall Discover Durham Days. I don't know if you want to talk about it briefly here or
no, I mean, we have a few ideas.
ideas, yeah.
I think one of them included Carolyn, who's not here,
Yes.
to get her feedback, because we were kind of hoping to have another one that was kind of a tag team of historical information as well as maybe geology, like combining those together, maybe out at Long Marsh and along the Sweet Trail. But and then we've got several ideas to follow up from. But we are welcome to new ideas. And then the other thing is Veronique. This was unknown to me, but Erin is going on sabbatical. So beginning in January, she'll be gone for 6 months. So we're kind of hoping for somebody else maybe from this committee or from the Conservation Commission who's really interested in maybe trying to coordinate some of these site walks and for the public and to kind of join our little group to help coordinate. So it depends. I don't know. I would like to try to maybe do a bike ride, but I'm not sure how feasible that is, like a family-friendly one on some of our trails. I'll either reach out to Brian Keegan or John Natchley for that one, but so we'll see how that goes. I'm not sure. I'm not a mountain or trail rider myself, so I'm not sure like the feasibility of that, but we were trying to think of ways to reach different types of users in town. And then other potential ideas we had was maybe a kayaking, but I know that we need to talk to Rachel about that first, because I'm sure there's some liability issues surrounding that, but Veronique can get kayaks from Great Bay Resource Protection Partnership for free, and so that might be an option to have family friendly, or there might need to be like a minimum age potentially.
Yeah.
And what were the other two? Maybe have Steve Eisenhower do a site walk on one of the UNH owned lands, either East Foss Farm or West Foss Farm. But again, that is dependent on his availability and interest. And then
Invasives, do an invasives walk at Stallworthy.
at Stallworthy, we've
'Cause-
got that one nailed down.
Yeah, because we've had, so when we had Durham Day, I brought a bunch of invasives. We had a table with invasives information and the real plants, and people were really engaged with that. I think we get a lot of questions about, people want to do the right thing, but they don't really know how to tackle it. So I think there's really a lot of interest in invasives, so that would be a good thing to do. So we thought, invasives at Stallworthy for work. So that's the ideas, so that's the ideas we were playing with so far. Some of them might not happen this fall because that's not like the season, or, so we are trying to figure out what's feasible for the fall season for the walks. So yeah, and we'd absolutely welcome anyone who would be willing to start helping with those, in the new year. That would be great. And I'll talk about it, we can talk about it at the Conservation Commission too. There's a couple people there who have interest in helping with those.
Is Roanne still active in that? No.
No, she is not, no.
Okay. So right now it's you and
Erin, Hale,
Aaron
And Veronique.
Veronique,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Aaron's not going to be available starting in January.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And Rachel just does the poster, right? Correct? She does the promotion.
She does the promotion,
She does-
Rachel does, yeah.
Yeah, Rachel does the promotion part. And
Okay.
Yeah, so we send our ideas and our synopsis and the days and times to her, and then she does a promotion and then also the registration.
Yeah, the signups, yeah.
Which we decided we needed to do after we had like 60 people turn out for one of them. We had 40 people or 45 for the Lichen Walk, and then the Full Moon Walk, we had at least 60. And
Wow.
so we're,
Awesome.
it's awesome, but it's also not, it decreases the kind of the user experience,
Yeah.
experience and the ability to kind of work with a group that size can be challenging, and trying to inform them about the trails and
Yeah.
whatever different focus we've chosen for that particular walk and activity. So the last couple, Rachel, Aaron, Veronique, and I decided to have an actual registration with a cutoff of, I think, 25
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
So we'll probably continue that.
Excuse me, Neil, Ted has his hand up in Zoom.
Oh, hi Ted. I'm sorry. I didn't recognize that.
No, not a problem. I was going to say, based on my time at the university and the Department of Natural Resources, and as the former chair of the Woodlands and Natural Areas Committee, if Steve Eisenhower is not available to do the Foss Farm kind of walkthroughs, certainly at least East Foss Farm, I know like the back of my hand, so it'd be pretty, I can always volunteer to step up on that if Steve Eisenhower's not available.
Okay. We were kind of hoping he could talk a little bit about management, current research that was going on, and
Yep,
kind of
yep,
like
I got all that.
Gotcha.
Great.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you,
Ted.
Ted.
Thanks.
If
And,
you-
and Ted, if you want to, you can just kind of break in if you have a comment, please.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
No, I
That's
started to, but then maybe I didn't speak quite loud enough, and conversation continued, so I was just waiting my opportunity.
Okay. Very polite.
Thanks for the offer.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. And the last couple things are also at Durham Day. Thank you to Neil Elliott, who volunteered to help us man the table, and Jacob Cragg from the Conservation Commission. We had 81 engagement. Jacob kept the tally, and a lot of other people who just stopped and kind of looked. I think it was really great. There was a diverse crowd there. We were able to target to get different audiences coming to the table, so I think it was great. We are having a table at Durham Farm Day at La Roche Farm on Saturday, so if you'd like to stop by and say hello, it's gonna be manned by Neil, Marty, Elliot, myself, and also Dwight and Ben Phelps from the Conservation Commission. So I did like basically three shifts, and we're gonna take like kind of turns, and there's always gonna be 2 people. So I think it's a great opportunity. So I'm looking forward to it.
Bring the kids.
Yeah, last year I worked the whole day, so I think I
Yeah.
So you're very familiar with the
couldn't
experience.
drag the kids there for the whole day. Are you going to be located at La Roche Farm again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes, and hopefully with the new banner,
Yeah,
Veronique
hopefully.
has put in
Yeah.
for
We ordered a banner from Portsmouth Signs for the Conservation Commission because I had to borrow a sandwich board the other day for Durham Farm Day. It's nice to be identified and recognized.
Yes.
So, and it can be useful for other events, you know. So hopefully the banner is printed in time. I have good hopes. I confirmed yesterday. I think it would be good, and that's a really small investment.
Okay.
Well, last year Farm Day, Roran did an amazing job setting up the whole display, and I pulled some stuff in about pollinators and had some flyers on that, but she brought things from Van Berkom Nursery with all these different pollinator plants, and that was really our focus, was pollinators and the importance of, you know, farmland as wildlife habitat. And then I looked and I was like, we don't have anything that says Durham Conservation Commission
Right.
or Stewart, and we were sitting next to the master gardeners, and so people kept confusing us as the master gardeners. We're like, no, really, we're from the Conservation Commission and Land Stewardship, and so even Aaron and I are like, we need to make sure we get a banner for the next time we have a table.
Yeah, the thought come
there
for
wasn't-
Durham Day, because I was like, what type of identification do we have? And he was like, I don't know.
And Durham Day, Roanne made these beautiful posters and I think a series of 3, and she had them printed up at work. But those posters had the identification of the Land Stewardship and Conservation Commission. So it was within that first one, embedded within those posters she made specific for that event. But
That's very good.
She did Roanne did a beautiful job for both of those tables last
Nice.
year, I think.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if our table was beautiful, but I think we had enough, I don't know what Neil thought, we had, you know, enough material and things to talk to people about.
Yeah, and I would agree, and people were interested in the brochures, and we handed out a lot of these, so people who could kind of see the scope of what we have for conservation land in the town, even though this isn't complete. And also, like you said, there was a lot of interest in the plants that were invasives versus the plants that weren't, and how to recognize each. So it was a learning opportunity as well.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and my
What's
last
that?
thing is I'm meeting with Neil and Dwight this week, and we are talking with Anne, talk to Sarah, and we're starting to work on the budget, and then I'll meet with Todd and Gail. So these talks are just starting right now for the next year.
Yes, yeah, and I spoke to Gail the other day, and she informed me that any proposals that we have for Conservation Commission and Land Stewardship need to be into her by the end of the month. I'm just clarifying the process. And then you two would reach out to us to set up a meeting to discuss and to review what we
Yes,
propose.
that's right.
Is that the correct
That's correct.
process? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and then I'll have a formal budget submitted to the council by the last business day in October.
Oh,
And then-
okay,
And then the council begins their review in November and December and wraps up by the end of December.
great, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Veronique.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the next thing on the agenda is to continue the discussion that we started, I think, back in May, actually, about the allowed uses and the restricted uses on the town lands. And I went back and I collected all the documents that I had on this, and starting back, I'm just going to talk about this for 2 minutes, starting back with the Managing Our Lands Subcommittee, which I didn't hand all these out because I think everybody's had them. And then there was this kind of a spreadsheet that was put out. And then there was a discussion from May about, that included some graphic elements to it. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of the documentation that's already existing is this one, which is kind of our formal document. So what is everybody's understanding of our purpose? Is it to update this document and to bring in or to put onto this document the properties that aren't on there? I'm just kind of trying to get a feel for exactly what, what our purpose is with this. I think it's great, and it's also going to help and be, I think, a critical factor in terms of what we put on the signage. But I just want to know where we're headed with it. Does anybody have a clear idea, or are we kind of floating on our own here? Because it can go several ways, right? I mean, whatever we do, I think, should obviously be put on a town website.
I think there was some lack of clarity at some properties. There was some question about whether we should make some changes at some properties, at other properties as well. So I think it's twofold. One is to update the signage, to first figure out what's allowed everywhere, and then update the signage on site with clear language, direct language, and understandable icons. And then to also update what we put on the website so you can find out either way, either on site or in advance,
Okay.
what we allow.
Okay,
So I
great.
think it's kind of a holistic.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that actually makes sense. Okay, so in the end, we'll have one document that's on the website that has all this information on it, and it may not take this form even, it may take another form. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree, and it may be not much like one document. We can at the end make one new document from everything, but it was like to have something clear for each property,
Okay.
matching the property, and then making sure we have uniform signage at each property, so people don't get confused when they go from one property to the other and don't see, we don't use the same icons or the same format. It was just to have a uniform format, signage, at the properties physically, and also information, on the website. So it's kind of redundant anyways, But I think the most important part was the uniformity of the signage. And then, from there, have new signs made at each property and make sure each property has a sign, which we discussed. Not every property has a sign right now.
Right.
And then, I feel like the document combining everything can be something afterwards, because that can be very easy, from all that. But yeah.
Okay. Okay, so all that signage obviously is going to flow from whatever we decide here in terms of what's allowed and what's restricted.
Yes, and if we want to add something like the highlights or that we talked about, we would define, or other points that we want people to know before they visit the property.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start then with the property summaries from the July meeting that Ann put together in just like a Word format, and I believe this was pretty much taken from Marty's notes anyway, but let's work from Ann's document. And I think the thing to do first is to just go down through and kind of reconfirm where we ended at our last meeting, and just make sure everybody's on board with the wording in terms of what's allowed and what's restricted. And then after that, we can go in and start to list what we consider to be the highlights or the amenities. So, okay, so we'll just start from the top. So common allowed / restricted uses. So I'm just going to read them, and then anybody that wants to comment or thinks that there's something that needs to be changed, just go ahead and jump in. So open dawn to dusk, all the properties. Dogs need to be under control at all times. Remove all dog waste, and we should probably put a little note in there that, remove the dog poop bags as well. Don't just leave them by the side of the trail. That's my editorial comment. I don't think that should really be on here, but that's my pet peeve. I think everybody is annoyed by that.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, carry in, carry out. So there's no trash cans anywhere. Veronique told me that she got a comment from somebody when she was picking up trash out at I don't remember where you were, but somebody complained that there weren't any trash cans. So of course they have to throw the trash on the ground. Yeah, that just of course makes sense. Okay, and then walking / anything that you do on two legs would be allowed on every property. Okay. Everybody on board with that? Okay. All right, what's restricted? No horseback riding, no motorized vehicles, and I just want to go back to that in a second. No camping, campfires, or fireworks. No metal detecting and no digging. No disturbing plants, wildlife, or cultural features. I would agree to put no feeding of wildlife on there as point number 10. Does anybody object to that? She has it as a question mark.
Or is it part of no disturbing? I mean,
Do we have issues with wildlife feeding?
I was trying to think.
What's that?
Do we have issues with wildlife feeding?
Not that I've heard of. Ted, do you have a comment on that one?
Yeah, not so much on the wooded properties, the hiking trails, but I do know in the old days at the mill pond, people used to go down and feed the ducks and geese and dodge the swans. I think like Marjorie Milne was one of those. Feed the swans. I don't think it's a big deal, but
Okay.
you know, I don't think anybody would have a problem.
Okay, so it's not really necessary to list it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're okay with it, just a touch point to history.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, the question I have is, are these, it says property summaries, but, you know, I think most of the properties that are listed here, I guess they do have town landing. I was going to say, this is not a comprehensive list of our town-owned properties. This is, you know, these are more or less what we would call the conservation areas, or those areas that, versus a, you know, town park. There's lots of properties that Rich and his team manage. I mean, we don't have the parks on here. I mean, Jackson Landing is, but that's because that really is a multiple use park. There's some nature trails, there's the hockey rink, there's the playground, there's the boat launch, right? But, you know, we don't have Woodridge Park on here. And, you know, that because it's not a conservation area, so we're not really making those policies or procedures for that, those pieces. I'm just saying that I think that we need to think about this is, are these property summaries that we're coming up with specifically for conservation areas? And that is my understanding, because I think a lot of the management decisions about those other pieces are really defined by Todd and Rich and Rachel, and I will let maybe Todd respond to that.
I mean, we do include Jackson's Landing on this list.
Well, that's because
Yeah.
it has like a mile or a mile and a half of trails that but Veronique isn't responsible for the playground or for the boat launch, right? So I think it's because there's multiple different programs that are engaged on that property, right?
Would it be helpful to focus on the properties that we feel sort of either are under the jurisdiction of land stewardship, kind of exclusively, or need a kiosk? Because if down the road we decided that, you know, on the website we want to list all of them together somewhere, and we kind of have that set up now. When you go and look on the website, it lists like the tot lot and everything. It's just not, not all those properties have links to their own page, but they are listed. Or like a PDF is a much easier thing to update, whereas I think the signage is the most complex. So would it make sense to focus this effort now on the properties that we think need signage, and or, you know, no other committee is going to be responsible for them in any way? So we feel like we should have a discussion, because like the week's log, because even if we're not putting a sign out there per se, we would be the ones responsible for the information online and things like that.
And the stewardship of the property,
Right.
Right,
right?
Yeah.
right.
I mean, there's a couple other smaller ones that are not on here, like Ellsworth.
Yeah, I think there's 17.
There's some random
here,
ones
if I
that-
counted correctly.
You know, and again, there's not going to be the couple little properties over off of Dame Road
Yep.
that are part of the Sweet Trail and the Great Bay Protection Partnership. They're these tiny little slivers of land that are not stewarded, and they're surrounded by New Hampshire Fish and Game Land, and there's no trail that goes through them. It like kind of skirts right along the boundary of one of them, but isn't actually on the town land along the Sweet Trail. So, you know, there's so many other properties you could add to this, but we're not going to, because it's not about public use or the potential for
Right.
public use and
Correct.
access,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So
That's
I
what
guess,
makes, go ahead.
sorry. So I guess my question to you, Sarah, is like, did you think some properties on this list should not be part of our discussion? Is that what you're saying, or do I misunderstand?
Yeah, I mean, I would categorize them like yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think some of them are up in the air right now. Like Weeks Lot doesn't have a formal trail. It has an old trail that you can barely follow on it. It
Right.
is used. It does have access from it through the adjacent property for fishing. So people go out there, and I've seen trucks parked along the power lines where people have kind of cut through to get access, but they're doing it off trail
Yeah, and
as a public lot. And so there's public access, but we're not going to develop that unless there is more parking, better parking access, and there's the potential in the future for that if there's additional conservation work done in that area. But, so, I don't know. I think because it is used, there's public access, I would leave it on here, but maybe categorize these as ones with developed trails and ones without.
Yeah, that makes
Does that make
sense.
sense?
Yeah, I think anything, my take on it is that anything that has public access in some way should be on here. So those small slivers you were talking about that people aren't likely to find their way onto and that aren't stewarded, that aren't really managed, then it doesn't make any sense to spend any time on it. But anything here which has public access, and you know, including properties like Pike, for example, you know, people can go on that and they can access it. So even though there's no trails, nothing developed, it's still a place that people can explore. So that's my feeling.
right. And I
And
feel like
I don't think it's a waste of time.
what we've been working on is anything that has its own web page right now, like its own page on the website,
Yeah.
we should update, like, you know, I don't want to see like we update like a lot of pages, but like some of them, like, you know, we leave weeks, you know, untouched. Like we should work to be able to update all the properties that have web pages that we are responsible for, like you're saying, you know. Obviously, we all understand there's not going to be a kiosk at Wix, you know, at least in the near future, you know what I mean? But I think if we do all this work right now as a whole, it will be a base for more information to update the website, you know, so that it doesn't look like, oh, did we forget about this property, or did we not think about, you know, we're not updating it. We can still use our what we're gathering to put icons on the page for weeks, for example, you know, to match the other pages once we're going to update everything. And I think, like you're saying, if down the future, you know, down the road we do a trail, or, you know, then we already have kind of the work started to make a sign.
Yeah.
You know, so that was my thought process. But that's what I was asking is, otherwise, is there anything? You know, we put Wagon Hill Farm there. I don't think we decide. I think Todd and Rich decide about the uses and things like that about Wagon Hill Farm. But Wagon Hill Farm also needs a sign, a kiosk with a map and everything at the entrance. So that's something that, you know, can be talked about further, maybe.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. And maybe as we're going through, let's just make a note of which properties currently have kiosks and, which ones don't, just so we can kind of have an organized, kind of get the, the bigger picture. So,
Neil, may I just make
yeah,
a comment? I wondered myself whether just calling these town properties was just too,
It's too vague.
it's just too
way
general. When I was typing up the minutes, I was thinking, well, we don't mean the Public Works building, that's a town property, or the town hall. So in the minutes I wrote, I titled it as Town Conservation Areas
I was
and
gonna say,
Parks.
yeah.
But I think we should try to be
Consistent
more
with
specific.
using that, yeah, okay, yeah.
more
Yeah.
specific
Yeah.
with it. And we could we add Woodridge? I mean, should it have a place? Should it have a webpage?
It does, but I think it's under Parks and
It's
Rec.
on
We
the
did
Parks and
include
Rec.
it on
Okay.
our, I mean, when Jim and I drafted that, Jim Lawson and I, we included Parks and had Rachel
Yeah, this would be-
review it. And
Yeah.
I mean, Rachel helped with that process
think
too,
that-
and
yeah.
going through it, and editing and making sure she was comfortable with what we put on there. But the idea is that it had those lands that we were really trying to promote for public use. That is different than, say, we're not trying to promote Wagon Hill North for public use. I mean, it has one very overgrown trail that Fish and Game clears, brushes out once a year so that they can have access for cottontail research, right? There's no parking. It's like there's a pull-off, there's room for one car to pull off on the northern side of that. And so it's not really, so I would almost make sure that it's really clear that, can the public access that? Yes, but there are no managed trails or parking by the town at those properties. And I think that needs to be clearly communicated in this. So I wouldn't say undeveloped property. I would be clear there are no developed trails or parking, right? That,
which one was that you were talking about specifically?
well, Wagon Hill North,
North
Weeks
40.
Lot.
Oh, Wagon Hill North, okay.
Pike.
Pike.
Yeah.
Meadows right now. I mean, Meadows has
Garden.
it does have the community garden there, and so community there, but there's no, and there is an old trail, but there's no real parking unless you park at the town hall and you walk up, so that's possible, but then, again, there's no trails and there's no intention of putting trails until that drawdown happens and we can better assess where those trails might be able to go, so.
Yeah, so maybe we just need to take it property by property and make a decision as to whether or not we want to put it on the list and maybe make notes of, no trails, no parking. So people know, what they're headed into if they choose to go. But I did want to make an observation that Woodridge Park is on this list, Sarah.
Yes,
So-
right, we included
was-
it because Jim wanted it to be conservation areas and parks. He wanted it to be those properties that we really were promoting for that public use. And Rachel was on board with that.
Okay. But to answer Marty's question, yeah, I mean, I think everybody is in agreement that it shouldn't be called town properties, that it should be called conservation areas, and should we include parks, so.
Yeah.
If we're including parks, should we include Oyster River Park and Hamilton Chapel as well?
Right, so that's it. I mean, Rich mows those. That's the extent of that. Is there public access? I don't know how much they get used. I think so. I mean.
The Smith
So-
Chapel?
Yeah, Smith Chapel
It
and
gets used
Oyster
on
River
occasion.
Park.
There's benches and there's parking, because you can park on the street. So, I mean,
Right.
I think it's also kind of nice, I mean, there's the question of, do people frequently walk by a property or go past, I mean, not so much with Oyster River Park, but So Hamilton Chapel, I think there's this really cool building down there, right? And a lot of people look at, pass by and go, wow. And it might be nice to know that it's owned by the town of Durham and have some sort of sign there.
That's a good point.
And, then is our picnics allowed, or, are grave etchings allowed, things like that, would be questions. I think there's grave sites there, not too
There
much.
are, the families buried,
Yeah.
and plus the
The
dogs
pets,
out back.
yeah.
There's headstones for the dogs.
And then with Oyster River Park, there are at least, I can't remember if there's benches
There
at
are.
Hamilton
Yeah.
Chapel. Oyster
There's
River.
one bench at Hamilton Chapel, and there's several over at Oyster River.
Yeah, Oyster River definitely has some sort of, it has those benches. You can park in the street right there. And, some people have started kind of like organizing play times there, but people might, maybe like people would want to organize a birthday party if they knew it were town land. Like they could just have a birthday party in the park there and that would be, fine. Go and do a picnic and do that as long as you clean up everything, right? So it might be nice to kind of, I think there's the question of, do we want people who are passing by the property to identify that it's town-owned? Like, is that an asset? And then those things that maybe are underutilized, do we want to try and let people know more about them?
Yeah, I think people, when they go by Oyster River Park, think it's a neighborhood park, I think. They
Yeah.
don't have any idea that it's, public access. So I think that's a really good idea. If I lived in a neighborhood, I may not think it's a good idea to publicize it, but just in general, because it is owned by the town and it is open to people, yeah, I think it should go on the list for sure. I mean,
It's
if-
it's actually a nice park, and there's some trails along the water
Mhm.
there, so, yeah.
Okay.
It'd be nice to make people aware of it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's there.
So, and also because if we're calling the list conservation areas and parks, then
Right, then you can
why
add
not
it.
include it? So.
What would you call the area behind the library? I'm just saying, I would go there with my kids.
Oh.
There's a little pond, there's like a little story walk, there's picnic tables. I used to
Right.
just,
Well, you could say, 66 Main Street also has a pocket park, right in front
I
of
know,
it.
it's like, where do
It's
you gotta figure
quite a
out
bit.
where you draw
Yeah,
that
that's true.
line.
Right. Where you draw that line, that's a good point.
Right, and I think you do. I think you do need to draw the line. And I don't know if I would include the library. I was just throwing
would
that out as a
not. I would
hypothetical
not.
to push everybody's
library
like
amenity.
limits
Yeah.
and thinking, but, because it's really more associated with the,
LA 66
Yeah.
Main
Well,
Street.
but there's the Mill Pond Park as well,
That we have.
next to Mill.
yeah, and I think that was was Mill Pond
Yeah.
Park on here? I think it was.
Yeah, it is on.
It is, it's at the very end of the first page, and so that's where it's like, Town Landing and Mill Pond Park are really parks, and they were included on here, which, to me, if I was thinking about this as conservation areas, I don't know if I would have included those on this list, right? So that, but if we are including parks, and you have Mill Pond and Town Landing, then you probably should add these other parks to here too, so.
Tot lot would be helpful because we do receive queries from people saying, what is that? Can public use that? How do you get there? So that would be another item.
Are you talking about the tot lot
Tot lot,
faculty?
Yeah.
That's a tough one because we don't maintain that at all. And we get calls for that every so often. And so we're stretched for resources. We can't maintain them all, obviously. And that's one that I think we'll brush hog, once a year, once a season. And there is interest. I believe there used to be like local, kind of neighborhood folks that maintained that to a higher degree, but I think that's dropped off. Yeah.
Well, I think rather than thinking kind of categories of is it a conservation land, is it a park, I think thinking about the use and really focusing on kiosks at this point, because online we can always add to or take away from much more easily.
Mm-hmm.
But what needs a kiosk, and then the driving of that not being about whether it's a conservation land or a park, but what do people drive by it and wonder what it is, because there's a space there, but it's not really well kind of classified. Like, the little Pocket Park at 66 Main, I think people get that it's public space. You know, the Memorial Park downtown, people get that it's public space. The library, people I think on site, I didn't know about that, so now I know about it. So maybe there could be like a little bit better, you know, signage on site or mention, it is on the town's website as a location, but I don't think we need a kiosk or anything like that there.
Right.
So thinking
Because
about.
the library manages it.
Right.
In Public Works.
Right. But some of the other parks, you know, maybe people aren't familiar, they have questions about, you know, is this town land, can it be used, who owns this land? And I think that's kind of why maybe the Milne and Mill Road Park are on here, is because, you know, people will see that space and they are not maybe 100% sure if it's public or private if there weren't the signage, right? And also then there might be some questions about how people use it, like maybe there are issues with people using it in ways that we don't want it to be used, and so that's why the signage is important. So thinking about the use, and really is it, you know, do we want people who are passing by to know about this property, or are people already using this property but in a way that we don't want them to, and so we need the signage there?
Okay. So you think the best way to do that is, as we go down the list, to point those specifics out?
Well, I think we have a really good list of, like, if these are the properties that we are thinking about for kiosks, or, you know, some of them, the undeveloped ones, not having kiosks, but we need to update their information online. And I think the question is just whether we'd want kiosks at Woodred Park, Hamilton Chapel, and Oyster River Park, or not. I mean,
And the top mark. I would, yeah,
And if not a kiosk,
a sign,
sign.
just a sign.
right?
or just a
It doesn't
sign,
necessarily have to be the whole
yeah.
structure.
Rich, I have not looked at the deed or Todd, about how Hamilton Chapel came to the town,
Oh, yeah.
but I would imagine that
There's
there
a whole
were
history on
some,
site, on the website.
there were some, yeah, I should look, maybe, some deed restrictions associated with that particular piece. And then, we've lost Ted, because I was gonna ask, are the trustees of the trust fund involved with that at all? Was there a trust that was established
There
as part of
is,
that?
there is a trust. I think the trustees have basically designated us for the use, Public Works, when I say us, the use of the facility. On occasion, there is an inquiry about renting the chapel for a wedding or some other type of event. We have to be very careful because it's very time consuming. There's some sensitive artifacts and other types of, you know, materials in the chapel that could be damaged or go missing if you know, we left the door open continuously. So when we do have this inquiry and somebody's interested in having a wedding there, we actually go there with them. We'll actually do a pre-existing video of that and photos to make sure that everybody's in agreement. This is the condition of the chapel, because we then issue them the key because they want to set up for a wedding. They want to have guests come in, you know, and there's, you know, little pews and everything that they sit in. And then we'll finish, at the end of that, we'll come back and we'll do an inspection to ensure that nothing was damaged, all the artifacts are still there. So it's a very time-consuming effort on our part when that happens.
Yeah.
And that's why some folks have recently, over the last probably month and a half, there's been some questions about, hey, can we leave that open during the day for people to just go in as they'd like, or can we have, you know, tours of that? We just don't have the time to be able to do that, and we try to accommodate the weddings and other events there. But there's on the website, there's an extensive history and documentation of that whole facility. It's pretty interesting.
How much is the historic committee? commission
they're-
involved with that?
They're involved. In fact, I think there's been some discussion recently about them hosting kind of an open house. I don't know
Yeah.
who was included in some emails recently about, those same folks that were interested in having it open on a more frequent basis. And maybe we can, work with the Historic Heritage Commission to, have a tour of that and an open house. So that would be a fantastic idea. I think that would be great for the neighborhood and the community to see what's there.
Yeah, and I think if you do put any signage up, I think that they should be engaged and involved for sure in how that information is
Yeah,
presented.
I think Larry's, he's part of that. He's in that loop and he's very much engaged in it already.
I mean, with anything historic, I, like you, Rich, I get very sensitive about the potential impacts that
Right.
people can have.
Right.
And that public access and use and advertising it, like making it known that this is like a public
Yeah.
space, because I think, so I do think you need to be a little bit more, I would be a lot more subdued with the signage, is all that I would say. And maybe having a sign that said, this, Hamilton Chapel is owned by the town of Durham, and like quiet public reflection is encouraged, or welcome, is welcome. Like something small and just that labels it, but doesn't really advertise it, because I think there, as you know, and Veronique knows, you look at Milne, which is very much known and open, and Mill Pond, you end up with graffiti and trash pickup. You end up, there's, with regular routine access and use by the public, there can be issues. And
Yeah.
I just think you want to try to avoid those at that site as much as possible.
If I recall
I don't know how you
correctly-
feel, Rich, but that's
No,
like my
I think
gut
I'm in the
instinct.
I'm in the same kind of mindset as you, but I also, it's a beautiful location.
Yeah, it's a beautiful site that you want
It's a beautiful
people-
building,
Yeah,
and, the town owns it. There should be some way of allowing people to really experience, what that's like. So I think this open house idea, maybe that's more of a regular thing, that there's at least
Right.
one or two a year.
Yes.
That people can enjoy that.
I think that's a lovely idea.
Yeah. And I think there's also recently a bronze plaque, I think, was put on one of the pillars when you're walking up the stairs. So it does explain the history and that it is owned by the town. Yeah.
I've lived
It's a
in,
balance.
I've lived in that neighborhood since 1993, and I've never had the opportunity to go into that building. I've looked in the keyhole, but we've had neighborhood events, and we've inquired about having it be open so people could, because people are very curious about it. I
Yeah.
think most of the people I know in that neighborhood have never been in
Yeah.
the building.
Yeah, I think
And-
if there's like a responsible party affiliated with like a group like the Land Stewardship
Yeah.
Committee or Concom or Heritage Commission who takes ownership of that event and
Yeah.
says, I will make sure that it's not damaged, people aren't doing, things inside the chapel
Yeah.
that might, degrade some of the artifacts. I think that's a great idea, and it provides some
Yeah.
kind of confidence and
Yeah.
comfort that things won't be damaged.
Discover Durham. It's not a trail, but
It's not, yeah.
I know it isn't. Yep, that's
we
an
could
option.
work conjointly with the
Right,
historic.
with
That'd be
historic.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Because that's
And
I mean,
maybe, and maybe it's like a half-hour tour or something like that, or
Right.
they have half-hour tours twice in one day, and then
Yeah.
there's
Right.
like, you can enjoy a picnic lunch and a walk
Yeah.
down
Oh,
by
yeah.
the water or something like that.
Smith Chapel, wastewater treatment plant.
That's right. Woohoo!
that's
Yeah,
on
exactly.
a cool day.
It's kind of a cool, yeah.
Okay,
So we, sorry, we
No, that's
we got
okay.
sidetracked a little bit because I was concerned about well, you pointed out at the beginning, like, what should be on this list? What are we missing?
Mm-hmm.
What is the end goal? And so we got
Not bad.
sidelined into like, what properties actually
those
should
are-
be on here and how
I think it's a good discussion.
we're kind of like categorize these different properties or how we view them generally, so.
Neil, I have to leave.
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you, Rich.
Thanks.
Appreciate your
Take care,
input.
folks. Nice seeing you all.
You know, you joke, Rick, about the solid waste management facility, but it is on the list on the town's website of conservation land and parks.
It could be a
Because
discovered
it's so much
Durham.
open space.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, are there trails there that I'm
There's
missing?
many acres of forest land surrounding that, and there's actually a heron rookery down below. Yeah.
So it's the
Magnificent.
backside of
Yeah.
Long Marsh Preserve. So
Rookery.
Horseshoe Creek is this
Yeah.
piece of property that has no
Horse-
trails on
Horsehide.
it. Or Horsehide
Horsehide.
Creek,
Yeah.
which is a piece of property that doesn't have any trails on it right now, but it connects the transfer station land, conservation land with Long Marsh Preserve. And actually, a lot of the lichen research that Jeremy Howland did when he collected was back on that Horsehide Creek and part of that DPW parcel.
Which is no longer a creek. It's a
No, is
giant
it so
flooded
dry?
wetland. No, it's a flooded wetland.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the beaver activity is just so apparent. We actually, that same area, the upstream, the inlet of that culvert under Durham Point Road, we do have a beaver deceiver there that set that elevation at 4 feet. So it does allow water to pass through that culvert and it doesn't flood out the roadway. But, yeah.
Wow.
Take care,
Okay, thank
folks.
you, Rich.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's continue. I'd like to stop the meeting at 10 o'clock, which I think everybody would probably agree with. And, you know, just kind of going forward, I would like to kind of have a hard stop at 10 o'clock if we can, unless we decide as a committee to go forward. So I just want to digress for a minute. I know that you had prepared some information on graphics.
Yes.
Can you hold that
Sweet.
till the next meeting?
Sure.
Okay, I didn't want you to have, you know, done a lot of work and be prepared to present something and then not be able to. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it would be helpful before going through this list further, because I think that I have some ideas for maybe visually resolving some of the questions.
Okay.
But I think this discussion, kind of revisiting the motivation for why we're having the discussion, was really important.
Okay. Okay, so let's keep going through the list and we'll see how far we get by 10 o'clock. And then if you have anything to add in terms of, you know, graphic input that might be helpful, you know, feel free.
Okay.
Okay. So where did we get to? Okay, we got down to common restricted number 9, not very far. Okay, where the rules are different. And I guess Ann's purpose in putting that down is saying that some of the properties allow dogs or don't allow dogs on leash, some do or don't allow biking, some do or don't allow hunting. So I guess that's just something to keep in mind, but not anything that we need to make a decision on. Okay, so property specific, we'll start with Doe Farm. We have allowed dogs on leash and biking on trails. Restrictions, no hunting. And I guess we can talk about features now, but I kind of wanted to have that as kind of a separate discussion. You know, to kind of lump in features with what we might call amenities. So how about if we hold off on that for now, if that makes sense? Yes, Todd?
Because I think there are, well, let's see. All right, I'm in my mind including, okay, I'm good.
What do
Because
you-
there are common restrictions as well, so I'm good, thank you.
Oh, okay. All right.
Figured it out.
If you're sure. Okay. Okay, any comments on, and again, this is something that we went through at the last meeting, but the reason why we're going through it again is just to make sure that we're all on board with it and that there's nothing we want to change before we move forward. So, okay, does anybody have any comments on what's allowed? Oh, Ted, go ahead.
Yeah, since trustees have oversight on the Doe Farm, while we haven't had a thorough discussion of those things, I think we'd be happy with the things that are suggested on the,
You are happy?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
I think that all fits in, and I was just thinking, I'm not sure, can't do graphics, there was a graphic sent around earlier, maybe it's not the same graphic that we're talking about here, about the 7 rivers.
Oh, yes, Seven Rivers to the Coast is offering to have signage put up at,
Signage for the Seven Rivers area, and I noticed that the Doe Farm was left off of the Lamprey River.
Oh,
Anyway, that's all I have on that. But yeah, we're happy with the.
okay, good.
Yeah.
who's, are you responding to Seven
I'm
Rivers to the
going.
Coast?
I'm going with Michael Birent today at 2. From 2 to 3, we're going to meet the person from Seven Rivers to the Coast, whose name escapes me right now, about the signs. And so I'll mention it because she's like still in the planning phase. So yeah, that's on my agenda.
Thank you, Veronique.
Okay,
What-
great.
May I just say something while we're just, that's come up?
Mhm.
I would like much prefer that these Seven Rivers signs not be a freestanding sign on a post. If it could be incorporated on a kiosk. It's just, just adding another sign is, in my mind, more clutter, more, more view disruption. So if we could avoid it, unless it's really necessary, that would be a suggestion. Do you know?
I would support that. We don't need a proliferation of signs and signposts. Get everything, Doe Farm, we're lucky, we've got a kiosk.
Yeah,
Pick it up there, but that's not the case elsewhere. And the next thing you know, you've got signs, everywhere signs.
yeah,
I was thinking the same song, Ted.
yeah.
The same,
Yeah, I agree. I think she wanted also just to talk about size of the
Yeah.
signs right now, but
Yeah.
I'll find out what's their plan and what we can work with. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
agree.
point, Marty.
I agree. Signs should be all conjoined on a kiosk because that becomes confusing.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Do you want to sing that song with me, Ted, or do we have a separate meeting on that?
I just flashed on a activity I had with the U.S. Forest Service more than 50 years ago when we were posting up all the new regulations and campgrounds, and my colleague and I did the same sort of walk. We had the radio on the work truck up, and they played that song. The other, yeah, keep stapling.
Okay.
It's the 5-man electrical band.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Hand out the kazoos.
Okay. I knew it wasn't Black Sabbath. Okay. Okay, so we'll hold the features for the next discussion, and everybody's agreed on allowed uses and what the restrictions are. Okay, and I just want to point out that in addition, all the restrictions that are listed above in points 1 through 9 are also applied to Doe Farm. And the no hunting is an additional restriction. Okay, Jackson's Landing, dogs on leash, biking allowed. No hunting at Jackson's Landing. Okay, and again, we'll hold the features until the next discussion. Anybody have any problem with what's on there? Allowed, okay, and again.
No, I question whether biking is, and this is, Rachel has to be part of this conversation, because I know that original trail, which has now become an interpretive nature trail, but it was first designed as a little mountain bike trail, but I know that it's never really been used as that. It's a little, and Rachel even says, like, it's a half a mile loop, like, nobody goes out there to mountain bike. No, it's just not used in that way. It's used by people in the neighborhood who know that it's there, and they walk their dogs out there. And as Rich is aware, and I don't know what the poison ivy issue is this year, but, DPW did treatment of some of the poison ivy out there last year because you couldn't safely get access to those trails as a family without walking through poison ivy. And
Yeah,
so,
they
like,
did this year too.
They did it this year too.
But
That's
the
great.
access to interpretative trail is still pretty bad. I mean,
Yeah.
So.
I'm just not sure that we we say it's an allowed use, but nobody really bikes there? Or do we say like, it's just not really appropriate for mountain biking, given the length, the size, the type of people who are out there, and it's just not reasonable. So I think personally, I would remove mountain biking or biking
Yeah,
from the allowed uses on that
So-
property.
I think what
agree.
we've kind of discussed in the past, though, is that in terms of communication, right, we really want to limit the amount of information we put out there. You know, you have a maximum of about 7 items before people will not remember or pay attention to your list. And so whether even talking about biking is relevant. And I would suggest it's probably not. Like if there is same with no feeding wildlife. We don't, no feeding wildlife, but if it's not a problem, then we don't want to use sign space for it.
I would agree.
And I
Yeah,
think
makes sense.
that, I sort of visually, I have a suggestion for how we might kind of combine all of the biking into one kind of bullet point that's a general, common kind of use. But I think that to keep in mind that we have very limited, as we go through these, we have very limited attention from the public, really, in terms of like how many items we can list. So unless something is a problem, it shouldn't make it on the list. And unless something is like a use or feature that people might not know is available to them, we don't want to put it on the list either. Like walking, hiking shouldn't be
Right.
on the list because it's obvious.
A given.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And I kind of feel, I mean, in this particular case, and I don't know how we want to designate those things, but like, maybe we just put biking allowed in parentheses, because what you're saying is, it's better for us just to remain silent. Nobody's going to ask us, can you mountain bike at Jackson's Landing? I don't think we're going to get that question.
Right.
And so if we don't say it's not allowed, or we don't say it is allowed, and if we don't, and if somebody ends up mountain biking there, are we worried?
They won't be there very long.
No, not unless they do like 20 loops or around there, right? Like somebody who's
Yeah.
training
Right.
for some sort of crazy decathlon, but I doubt it. So maybe there is a way that we indicate those things that we're just going to remain silent on because it's not an issue. Does that make sense?
So,
Yeah. Well,
and
I'm
if
not
we
sure we
just,
wanna-
if we just struck it and didn't mention bikes at all.
Yeah, that's
Because in the
Right.
last month's meeting, my notes say we said no biking at Jackson.
Yeah.
That's what I recall.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
and I
But-
also think but I don't also think that there's an issue to put something up that says no biking either,
Yeah.
right? I mean, to your point, but I don't.
Okay.
I was going to suggest for a common use, because we also want, in common uses, we want more positives than negatives. We talked about that, right? We don't want to have more restrictions than positive things. So we could kind of restate this, and it could be a common use across all properties. Bikes yield to pedestrians. E-bikes must be pedal assist. And that would, you could take a bike on this interpretive trail, but if you're an adult mountain biker, you need to be yielding to pedestrians, and you're going to figure that out pretty quickly. But maybe you're a family that biked there from the neighborhood, or you had the bikes in the back of the car, your kids are just learning to bike, and it's kind of a nice trail for them to do a little easy thing. I don't know, I haven't been on the trail. But that is a way that might simplify all of this bikes issue. If that were a common use, to say bikes yield to pedestrians, e-bikes must be pedal assist. And I think that may be, the e-bikes stating it as pedal assist versus class 1 and 2. Most people, even if they
Right.
own an e-bike, they don't know what class it is.
Right.
And as a public person, I don't know what that, if you're not in the world of e-bikes, you have no idea what that means. And so pedal assist, that's kind of visually, if I don't know anything about bikes, it's a little bit easier to say, okay, an off-road, what's the word I'm looking for? Like an off-road vehicle,
Yeah.
A motorcycle is a dirt
ATV,
bike.
dirt bike,
A dirt bike
yeah.
is not
Yeah.
allowed. That's clearly not pedal assist versus an e-bike. How do I differentiate those? So
Yeah,
anyway, that was my suggestion for the
That sounds
bike,
like
and
good
I think it
language.
might apply here.
yeah, that sounds very clear. So, and I like what you said about having more uses that are allowed than that are restricted. That makes a
Right,
lot of
yeah.
sense as well.
So, on that note, in terms of simplifying, with dogs and hunting, dogs are required by ordinance to be on a leash at all times on public property, period, unless there's a waiver given by the administrator. And that waiver has been given since 2000s at Wagon Hill Farm during the designated period. So really, a common restriction is dogs on leash at all times, period. Rather than having to state in each case, dogs required on leash.
Right.
And the same
Yeah.
thing with hunting. Hunting is prohibited on town property except one, which is Oyster River Forest.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's because we agreed to grant terms which require hunting.
Yeah.
Right,
So that, I don't know if that could simplify as well.
I
right.
think it will, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If
So,
there's only one part where either one thing or another thing applies, then you're right,
Yeah.
it doesn't need to go on every single sign.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, so I guess the question I have on that is, then will people assume that no hunting is allowed unless it's, specifically stated that it is allowed? I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we discussed that by saying the most important thing was to inform the public that hunting is allowed on Oyster River Forest for safety reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You
Right,
know,
and
Oh,
Long
right,
Marsh
right.
Preserve.
and Long Marsh Preserve
Not
from
that-
nearby
that
properties.
they're just because it's the
Um,
island among a sea of conservation lands that allows hunting on it.
Right,
So if you're walking through Long Marsh Preserve and somebody's a hunter, they can be there as long as they don't shoot a duck or a deer on Long Marsh. They shoot it on the Forest Society land or the Nature Conservancy land or Fish and Game. You could run into somebody pulling a deer out of the woods and they didn't shoot. And so it's one of those pieces where we should just allow hunting because that's what everybody else, I think it's confusing to hunters, it's confusing to the public, but that's a discussion for another day. I think that there should be hunting at Long Marsh. But
Okay.
I think, I think part of this that I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around is that when we say things like restrictions, and maybe simplifying it will help, like no hunting or bikes allowed or bikes not allowed, it implies that there's some access that you would think that activity could potentially take place there. And so I kind of go back to this idea of how, and maybe it goes back to that idea of features or amenities. Some of these have simple, small walking trails like Milne. You're not going to put no biking up there. Nobody's going to bike. They might get off their bike and maybe they biked there and then they get off their bike and they walk it in or something like that. But it kind of, I think by just having that be a part of what we list under something, it implies something that isn't even a feature or an amenity that people could take advantage of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the same thing applies to horseback riding. People aren't going to go riding a horse in, Milne Sanctuary necessarily. So,
Right. And it's it's one of those common, it's just a town ordinance,
yeah.
right?
Well, I think I have
So to sign it, again, it's this thing that, okay, maybe the town ordinance says no horseback riding, but you're not going to put it on a sign at Milne that says no horseback riding, right?
Yeah, that gets to M's point about, making sure that we don't oversign everything.
Yeah.
So I'd like to maybe wrap up the discussion for today, but if we could just make a decision, so Marty can put it on the meeting minutes as to whether we want to include some of those areas that we talked about, like Oyster River Park and Hamilton Chapel. Should we add those to the list for discussion as we go down through? Just a show of hands, I guess. What do you think, Em?
I think, I'm happy to follow the group's lead. I think I'd have to go by there and remind myself as to whether or not there's a sign for the property that just indicates that it's town property. I know that at Hamilton Smith Chapel there is, but you have to walk up to the chapel to see it. And
Yeah.
if you're not sure if it's private property, you might not do that. So, I think, some sort of sign at both those locations, at least indicating that it's town property would be nice, but whether that comes from us or the Parks and Rec Committee, I don't have any feelings about, and
Okay.
and I don't know if it's the right place to focus here, so I'm
Right.
happy to follow the group.
I agree.
Yeah, very
I agree. I agree with the locations, the chapel and the park and everything. But on the other hand, it's like we have to stay focused on what's our purview with the land stewardship subcommittee, and what can we decide. Some things we need opinions from other possibly committees and get involved. So should we just for now stay with the conservation areas? Properties, with the goal that we set up at the beginning of having better signage there, and not like kind of get all over the place. Then we'll have to get other partners involved with their budget, and so
Right.
I think we should stay concentrated on the original task we set to achieve.
Well,
On the
that's a question.
conservation
I
law.
think that's a question for Todd, really, because my understanding is part of the reason why this is such a diverse group of individuals is you have Rachel participating from Parks and Rec. You have a member of the Parks and Rec Committee on here. You have somebody from the Historic Commission on here. So that, and from Ag, right? So that you're getting the whole diversity of individuals representing different groups within town on and stewardship of these town-owned lands. So I would say, Todd, do you feel like we really should be focusing on these conservation areas, or do you think we should have, should we be weighing in on these parks, what might be designated as a park versus a conservation area?
I think for these purposes, I might leave out the Smith Chapel simply because it's more of a facility than a park. I mean, there's the grassy area in front, but I think I would include the Oyster River Park because people walk by and we get questions. What is that? Can I use it? And people should know they're welcome there. I'd leave out the tot lot just because we're not managing it in an active way. It probably makes sense to include Woodridge because some of these characteristics would apply. That like dogs on leash is important. I'm not sure.
Okay. Ted, do you have a thought on that? If you're still there?
He's gone.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to ask you whether you thought, we were in agreement that we should add Oyster River Park to the list.
Ted's
gone.
here.
He's gone.
Oh, he's gone. Okay. Bye, Ted. All right, so I guess that's what we'll do for now. We'll keep with our list that we started today, add Oyster River Park, and did you say that we should add Hamilton Chapel, or do you think?
No.
I think
Should
I'd
not
drop
be.
that out. I think I'd drop that out for this, for
Okay.
these purposes. And we can think about some signage closer to the road, which makes perfect sense. But like.
But not tot lot, because we're not promoting that for
Right.
public access.
Right.
Right.
But maybe add Woodridge Park because it is a property that is promoted for public access.
Right,
And it's
Right,
already
kinda
on this
that-
list
Drawing that
anyway.
line
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
between,
Yeah, and it would make sense, once we develop the iconography and the feel of the signage, to have a consistent signage at each town property, so residents know, oh, that's Durham, that's
Yeah.
official, we can go there.
right.
yeah, I think that's kind of where you're heading on that too, right?
Yeah, I think,
Consistent signage on everything.
well, if possible, if at the next meeting, I could maybe show some visual concepts before we continue
Yeah.
with the, because I think it will help us organize conceptually how this might look and how we might communicate this information, and I think it will make this conversation easier.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so we'll start with that.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thanks, everybody. See you September 10th,
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you.
8:30. Okay.